Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid? This has been the biggest debate in the NBA really over the last 4 years now. Who's the best center in the NBA? Is it Jokic? Is it Embiid? And as of right now in mid-March of 2022, this debate is as interesting as ever. Last year I made a video comparing these two players, and I thought it was the peak of how interesting this debate was going to get, but right now both of these guys are having the best years of their career, and I think most of us across the community can agree that these players right here are literally the top two candidates for the MVP award right now. Both of them have stayed relatively healthy throughout this year. They're leading their teams to amazing spots. Like I said, they're having career years. Both of these guys are probably widely considered across the community top 5 players overall in the NBA. And I think both of these guys too have given themselves cases to potentially be considered the #1 player in the entire NBA. But who's better between the two? Who's the best center in the NBA? Is it Jokic? Is it Embiid? Probably all of you guys watching this video, I'm sure if I were to put up a poll and if you were guys to vote, it would be about 50-50. It's extremely close. And today I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on this debate. These two are going head to head tonight at 7:30. Nuggets versus Sixers is going to be a great game to see, and before this game I wanted to give you guys my opinion on who's the better player between Jokic and Embiid and really break it down and analyze it. So with that being said, let's get into it. Let's start off by talking about Nikola Jokic and just how insane he's been this year. Like I said, he's given himself a very, very strong case to be considered the #1 player in the NBA. Last year when he won the MVP, a lot of people I think across the community thought it was more of a fluke season and that he would never win another one, but he's giving himself an extremely strong case too this year. And with the Nuggets being without Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. pretty much all of the season, having probably one of the worst benches in the NBA and one of the worst kind of supporting cast for their main star player in Jokic, it has been absolutely insane that he's been able to lead them to now being a top 6 seed in the Western Conference and having a record of 40-28. His overall impact is just incredible because I would honestly argue that Jokic is probably the most difficult player to guard for opposing defenses in the entire NBA because it's kind of a lot of teams have trouble deciding whether to double him or not and committing to double teaming him because he's such an amazing threat scoring wise. He has such good footwork. He can shoot that little turnaround jumper, those floaters in the paint, body his way to the rim if he needs to. But then if you double team him, he's such a good playmaker and is so good at finding open teammates that that's going to create opportunities for the Nuggets offense as well, no matter what the supporting cast is around him. That's why he's just such a difficult player to guard, and his amazing crafty scoring ability with his amazing footwork, his amazing jumper for his size, combined with his incredibly unique passing ability and court vision, just makes him insanely hard to defend. Jokic's scoring, especially this year, has been really impressive for me. I mean, he's just been so efficient, and it shows in the stats especially. He's averaging over 26 points per game so far this season. He's shooting over 57% from the field, a very efficient overall score, about 35% from 3, which is a little bit down from previous years, but he is shooting more threes. He's shooting a little bit more difficult shots, and that's still well above average at the center position, of course. He's also shooting about 80.5% from the free throw line, a pretty automatic free throw shooter for a center, and an overall 65.5% true shooting, which is almost about 10% above the league average for this season. And what's impressed me so much about Jokic too is how the other aspects of his game come into play here. And I've mentioned this about how hard he is to guard because you have to decide between doubling him or not, and he's easily the best playmaking center that we've seen in NBA history, and probably one of the best playmakers in general ever. I mean, like I said, his ability to find open teammates and make the right passes at the right time, and even just become like a better ball handler over time and run the offense in such creative ways and make some of these just insane passes, no-look passes, and just be able to generate offense for his team so effortlessly is just incredible. Not to mention he's probably one of, if not the best rebounders in the NBA as well. I've been really impressed with Jokic's ability this season to use his size to his advantage, not only defensively but also with his rebounding ability. This year he's averaging almost 14 rebounds per game. He's number 1 in the NBA in contested rebounds per game with about 6.2 per game, and his rebound chance percentage is almost 66%, which is absolutely insane as well. When we talk about his passing and playmaking ability, there's not a lot of really stats that can show his full impact here, but he is averaging 8 assists per game, an assist percentage of about 44%, which is up there with the best playmakers in the NBA, and overall his offensive impact has just been insane. And then what's impressed me the most about Jokic this year, and why he's kind of taken that leap from being considered just kind of like that top 5 to top 7 player to maybe the best player in the league, is because of how much he's improved his defense. Jokic looks so uncoordinated on the defensive end last year. Teams were able to pick on him and just put him in the pick and roll, and he was a borderline defensive liability at times, especially when you put him into that pick and roll. But this year he's improved so much as a defender. He's really learned how to use his size to his advantage. Like, a lot of the time when you see him guarding the rim defensively, he's able to get into matchups that actually bring out the defensive talents that he has. He does a good job of really just going straight up at the rim and using his size to his advantage to be a good rim protector. The Nuggets have found ways to take him out of the pick and roll a little bit more, but even then he has become a better pick and roll defender. He's just overall improved on that. His physical abilities have gotten better, and Jokic has definitely proved that he's actually now an over average defender, which really gives him a big chance to win the MVP again, because he's improved so much on that end of the floor as well. Overall, Jokic just had an insane season, and like I mentioned, he's really in contention truly to win another MVP and to potentially be considered the number 1 player in the NBA. And this is not to mention that he leads the NBA in pretty much all advanced metrics, which show his impact as well. Win shares, offensive defensive win shares, offensive and defensive box plus minus, VORP, player efficiency rating, all that kind of stuff. Jokic is number 1 in most of those categories, which shows his overall impact as well. So now let's talk about Joel Embiid. This is a guy who really had a slow start to the year, and then out of the middle of nowhere just starts dominating like he's the best player in the NBA. He's actually leading the entire league in points per game this year, putting up nearly 30 points per game, and his overall game has just been amazing this year, especially offensively. I mean, we always know that Joel's been that bully ball type of player who plays like a traditional big man in the post, but this year he's really started to add just a little bit more of a jump shot. He really has always had that as well, but now he's combined that bully ball game and his post-up game with kind of like a face-up game. He'll get the ball kind of on the block, and he knows how to shoot that little mid-range shot now. He's got a little fadeaway, and ever since James Harden got on the team as well, he's starting getting into a little bit more pick and roll action, which I've liked from Embiid. He's not really that kind of player. Like I said, he posts up and he's more of an ISO type of player, but when he's been getting a little bit more involved in the flow of the team's offense, especially with Harden running those pick and rolls, rolling to the basket, getting easy layups around the rim, running pick and pops, getting the easy 3-point shots at the top of the key and starting to knock down that shot a little bit more consistently. I just like that part of Embiid's game over the last kind of 2 weeks. So another thing that I think is important to note here is that Joel is so good at getting to the free throw line. He's averaging 12 free throw attempts per game this year and gets a lot of his points there. And some people criticize him for this because he's not getting points naturally, but the thing is it's not his fault that he's getting fouled. It's the fact that, I mean, he does get a little bit more calls than the average player, but he does kind of deserve that with how good he is. And the reason he gets to the line so much is because of how aggressive he is and because of how dominant and big he is, so that players need to foul him. And just because he's getting more points at the line, 2 points at the free throw line is the same thing as 2 points in a regular flow of the game and a regular field goal. I mean, the points that he's getting at the free throw line count for just as much as regular points. So something else I wanted to point out there. And then overall just his defensive game has always been a little bit inconsistent, but he definitely does have a case to be a top 15 defender in the NBA. A much better defender than Jokic still, I'd say. He does a good job of being a rim protector, a pick and roll defender, and even when he's switching onto the perimeter, even though he's quite a big and heavy 7-foot guy, he still has very good footwork out there on the defensive end of the floor. Embiid's always been a good rebounder as well, just like most centers are. I wouldn't say as good as Jokic, but he does use his size to his advantage, grabs about 12 rebounds per game consistently. And then this year as well, the biggest improvement to his game has been his passing ability and how he knows that he's going to get double teams a lot of the time when he's in the post. He's just that potent of an offensive threat. He's so good in the post that if you throw the ball down to him on the block or in the post, he's probably going to see that double team, and he's learned this season how to find open teammates better. He's got better court vision. He knows how to move the ball a bit better now, and his assist total has gone up as well, and his overall playmaking ability has gotten a lot better this season as well. Obviously nowhere near Jokic's yet, but the gap is closing, and Embiid, like I said, his passing ability, his ability to just get more involved in the team game plan instead of him just bully balling every possession, his ability to get more involved and pass the ball a little bit more and average almost about 5 assists per game, that's been impressive as well. So overall this season, when we look at some stats, Embiid's averaging about 29.8 points per game, which currently is number 1 in the NBA. He's number 1 in the NBA by about like 0.1. It's always really close between him, LeBron, and Giannis, but he's always going to be near that number 1 spot in points per game this season. He's averaging about 11.5 rebounds per game, and like I said, about 4.5 assists per game, which has been the biggest improvement to his game and what I've been the most impressed by from his game this season. And then when we look at some efficiency stats for Embiid, they've dropped a little bit, but he has really had to carry a bigger load this season, and his 3-point percentage, for example, actually is slightly higher than Jokic's this year. Overall, when we look at Embiid splits, he's shooting about 48.5% from the field, about 35.5% from 3, 82% from the free throw line, and an overall true shooting of about 61%. So he's not quite at Jokic's efficiency level, but he definitely is getting there. His shooting, his jump shot, that little mid-range shot that he has when he turns around the post or on the block, that's been a good shot for him, a pretty high percentage shot. His footwork overall with his scoring ability has been great, and offensively, he's just been one of, if not the best players in the NBA this season. An amazing, potent scorer, and like I said, the combination of his kind of bully ball game, his little turnaround mid-range game, and his game, especially with Harden in the last 2 weeks in the pick and roll and pick and pop, I've just been impressed with the balance that Embiid's been able to find on the floor this year. And then, of course, defensively too, like I mentioned, a near top 15 defender, and that definitely gives him a strong case as well to be the MVP this year. When we talk about the MVP award in particular too, the impact that you have on your team and the team's success has to come into play as well, of course. And like I talked about with Jokic, he's really led his team to a good spot considering the position that they're in, and Embiid's led his team to an even better spot. He's had more help, but the Sixers are currently sitting in that 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. That 2 to 5 spot is really close right now, but currently they are in the 2 seed and they're 41-25, and Embiid's done a really good job leading them to that spot and being their main leader and obviously best player and MVP candidate. Now, when we do talk about this stat here, on-off rating, which is essentially the difference in net per 100 possessions when you are on the court versus off the court, Embiid and Jokic are both extremely impactful, pretty much in the top 5 for qualified candidates in this stat. But Jokic is sitting at a plus 16.3 and number 1 in the NBA, while Embiid's sitting at about a plus 11.5, which is about 5th in the NBA. So a difference here, and the Nuggets bench is horrible, but I just wanted to point that out as well. Both these players are extremely impactful. There's a reason why they're in the MVP conversation, but Jokic has really taken his impact on his team to a whole other level. They completely fall apart when he comes off of the floor, whereas with the Sixers, with Embiid off the court, they're obviously not a good team, but they can survive with him off the court. Whereas the Nuggets, like I said, they completely fall apart when Jokic is off the court compared to when he's on the court, when they're one of the better teams in the NBA. When you try to decide who's the better of these two players, it's almost impossible. I mean, they're good at different things. They're definitely different type of players, really completely different type of players despite playing the same position. and it's really a coin flip. But when we break it down and make a comparison as simple as possible and look at these 5 main aspects of basketball, this is what I think is the comparison between Embiid and Jokic. We look at overall scoring, not just shooting, not just interior scoring, everything involving scoring. It's very close. They score in different ways. Embiid is putting up pretty much about 3 to 4 more points per game this year, but Jokic is slightly more efficient. I'm going to give a really slight edge to Embiid here, but the gap is very, very close. We look at the next one, which is playmaking and passing ability, and Jokic takes this one by far. Like I said, the gap is slimming a little bit here with Embiid becoming a little bit of a better playmaker this year, but Jokic's impact with his playmaking, his court vision, finding open teammates, making everyone better on his team, I got to give obviously a big margin to this one to him. We look at defense, again, overall defense. Embiid takes this one, but with Jokic's defensive improvements this year, the gap is definitely closing in here as well. We look at rebounding, which definitely isn't as important, but Jokic takes this one. They're both good rebounders, but Jokic definitely takes it. And then we look at impact, kind of everything, and everything overall, and if you were to take one player off, the impact that it would have on their teams, and I gotta go with Jokic on this one, and it's kind of close, but not really. We look at those on-off stats, the advanced metrics, the records with these teams when they're without Joel and without Jokic. Jokic is definitely the more impactful player, and overall, we look at this comparison, it's definitely very close, with especially Embiid being such a dominant scorer and a great defender this year. It's very close, but for me personally, I'm going to give a slight edge to Nikola Jokic here. I honestly think that if I were to have to choose one player to be considered the best player in the NBA right now, I think I would go with Jokic, to be honest. And when we look at the MVP race, it's definitely a little bit more complicated because of Embiid's team success. But like I said, Jokic's team is still succeeding a lot, which is insane considering the players that they're missing this year. So again, it's just such a close comparison, but I'm going to go with Jokic for both the MVP so far for 2022 and probably the best player in the league and a slightly better player than Joel Embiid. So that's all the analysis I've got for you guys today. Again, an extremely close comparison here. The comparison that's been filling up the minds of NBA fans over the last 4 to 5 years and probably will continue to. I want to hear your guys' opinions on this amazing comparison, so definitely be sure to leave your thoughts down below. Who do you think is the 2022 MVP? Who do you think is better right now between Jokic and Embiid? Thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you on the next video.